We have talked about the word genre several times this semester so far, but it might be helpful to clarify it again now, since at this point in history the various genres of music take on more distinct and significant characteristics. Genre refers to a style category. Works within the same genre will share the same features, elements, structure, or subject matter. It is a term used in all of the arts. For example, you might hear a critique about film which refers to the horror genre. In music, works of the same genre are often written using the same form, or overall organizational structure. For example, most of the songs that you hear today on a country radio station are all laid out pretty much the same way. After a short introduction, you will hear a verse, followed by a chorus, and then that form is repeated. When you turn on the radio, you expect to hear this form, and so it feels comfortable for you when you listen to it. This is the same principle behind the various forms used in the Baroque and afterwards in classical music. Works within the same genre or style category are put together in a similar way. The individual composer can then write something within that structure that is unique to their own needs or creative vision. While there were many distinct genres composed in the Baroque, we will look at only 5 in depth. These are the 5 genres represented on your listening list for this unit. We can divide these into several categories. Instrumental music, which is the concerto and the fugue. Secular music that is vocal, which is the opera or music drama. And sacred works that are vocal, which are the cantata and the oratorio. In keeping with Baroque aesthetics, all of these tend to center on the idea of a single melody as the focus. Not only does this melody serve as the medium for conveying emotion, but it also allows a single performer to take the spotlight. In the same way as one might glorify a wealthy patron as a singularly important individual, the focus on a single virtuosic or masterful performer brings focus to the highest levels of cultural pursuit. The only exception to this idea is the fugue, which was explored primarily by J.S. Bach in this period. Unlike other Baroque genres, the fugue is polyphonic. For most composers, it was mostly considered a compositional exercise, since it is quite difficult to write one well. But Bach put some of his best and most creative energy into this genre. He is the best-known composer of fugues in the history of music. A fugue is a polyphonic work that features imitation in the style of Renaissance music, but it is far more complex and advanced than a madrigal or a motet. Bach was himself a virtuosic organist and harpsichord player, so the level of difficulty of his fugues is related to how well he himself could play. Also, unlike a Renaissance vocal work, a fugue is generally performed by only one person sitting at a keyboard. The individual lines or voices are performed using the multiple fingers, or in the case of the organ, multiple feet, of the player. The Baroque concerto also highlights the virtuosic abilities of a star performer, but it is generally homophonic in texture. This was certainly considered to be the more modern and fashionable way of writing for the time. A concerto can be written for a single soloist plus accompaniment, or for a small group of soloists, which is called a concerto grosso, a term which means large in German. The group which accompanies the soloist or soloists is called the tutti, a word meaning all in Italian. This group generally played the same basic material over and over with some slight variations. This is called the ritornello, or little return in Italian. It is often translated as refrain in English, a word that you may have heard before. This enabled the soloist to provide contrast in between each repetition with the performance of acrobatic technical passages. The Baroque concerto is generally in 3 movements, or 3 larger sections, each performed with a break, with the first and last being in ritornello form, and the middle in a slower song style. The most common soloists in Baroque concerti, which is the plural form of concerto, were instruments such as the violin or the flute. The Baroque also sees the birth of one of the most popular and enduring musical styles of all time, the opera. Today, we often hear mass media mistakenly referring to any type of singing that is done to the accompaniment of an orchestra as being opera. However, opera is a distinct genre with structured forms and traditions that are far more specific than that generalized view. Opera is one of the only forms of music that appeared as a revolution rather than an evolution. That is to say that opera was the result of purposeful and specific planning on the part of a group of intellectuals known as the Florentine Camerata, rather than something which simply appeared organically out of predominant trends. The Camerata was a group of progressive thinkers which included academics, creatives, such as poets and musicians, and humanist philosophers. Under the encouragement and support of a wealthy Italian patron, the group met regularly to discuss the state of music and drama. Using the model of ancient Greece as an example, they eventually concluded that the best way to convey emotion through music was for a solo singer to emote in the same fashion as an actor delivering lines. Out of this idea came a style of singing called monody, or single melody. This was an innovation of the period, given that Renaissance singing involved many singers overlapping each other. The point was for the soloist to make an emotional connection with the audience. As opera is a music drama, meaning it is a play that is completely set to music rather than speaking lines, the performers sing all of the dialogue. In addition, they also take time to sing about how they are feeling. They focus on emotions, more than what you would hear in a typical stage production. To this end, two styles of singing are commonly found in operas. First, dialogue or plot is set to a style of singing called recitative, which is structured to sound like speech. The accompaniment is generally sparse, and the rhythms are paced to mimic sentence structure. After the singer conveys what is happening in a recitative, the reaction to that information follows. This is called an aria, which is a longer, more lyrical and melodic song form. In the aria, the soloist shows off technique and dwells at length on emotions and feeling words. Remember, the purpose of Baroque music is to convey affect, so this style of singing fits that aesthetic well. Opera quickly rose to a high level of popularity in the Baroque, but it was still considered vulgar and inappropriate for women to perform on stage. Even so, operatic plots, which generally focused on tragic stories of lost love, since these stories carry the strongest emotions, needed both male and female characters. Unfortunately, this culture came up with quite a terrible and barbaric solution. Young boys who showed promise at an early age were castrated prior to puberty so that they could retain their high boy soprano voice. Of course, this affected their development in many other ways and made them somewhat of a social pariah, but much in the same way as we often express a love-hate relationship with the stars of today, successful castrati shot to fame and could demand the highest of salaries. The sound of the castrati became so popular and iconic that they often sang male roles as well. As a result, there are many Baroque operas in which both male and female leads sing in the same high range. There is a small percentage of males born naturally into the world who are gifted with a high enough voice to sing these parts. This range is called the countertenor. In modern productions, the high roles of Baroque operas are sung either by a woman in male costume or by a countertenor. Thankfully, the practice of creating castrati has died out. The immense popularity of opera in the Baroque led to its appearance in the church, much in the same way as we have seen popular musical styles morph into praise music in modern churches. There are two styles of sacred operatic singing in the Baroque church. First, the cantata is music intended to accompany a mass or church service. The oratorio is a larger, lengthier work meant for special occasions or celebrations such as Christmas or Easter. In both cases, the style of singing common to opera was used, but these church productions did not employ the elaborate costumes or staging that were common in operatic productions. Instead, the soloists, together with a choir, in the tradition of a church choir, and a small accompanying ensemble of instrumentalists, perform in a concert setting, seated on a stage or altar. Here is an excerpt from an oratorio by Handel, which you will certainly recognize.